Hello, everybody. Mr. Viteri here, and this will be our last day of lecture via this platform. So, Unit 9, Day 5, and we're talking about endangered species. Now, certain species specifically, usually K selected species or specialist species, the species that don't reproduce very quickly and need to have special food or habitat. They tend to you know become endangered and eventually go extinct. Very different from our selected species, which tend to over reproduce, and it's very hard to get rid of them, especially if they're generalists. And so in these images here, we have sea turtles, and sea turtles, they're long lived, but they don't even start reproducing until they're about 20. And so when you're thinking of a species trying to repopulate itself, it doesn't really have a high biotic potential. That's a term used to describe how fast it would be able to reproduce. Let's say if half of them became extinct, or half of them half of them became extinct, that wouldn't make sense. If half of their population died of something, it would take quite a long time for their population to return. Versus the rat population probably could bounce back within a month or 2 months of something like that, because they are our selected and specialist species. So as species become more and more rare, sea turtles, elephant tusks, gorillas, tigers, uh, their value has increased, and certain type of people think that things like a rhino horn may have medicinal purposes, or certain things are very beautiful, or people like to have things that other people don't have. Do you think I'm lying? People like Supreme for whatever reason. No one else has it, so they like it. And so if you were the only one on the block that had, let's say a gorilla hand of some sort, like an ashtray, because that's what they used to do, uh, that might have given you some type of status. So sometimes people think that the rhino horn could cure all ailments. And so, in order to reduce this, CERCLA was made, and it's an international ban on trading of endangered species. So, therefore, we cannot legally buy tiger hide. We cannot legally buy, a gorilla hand or ivory tusks or things like that. And so that's one way that we're trying to deal with saving endangered species. And the reason why is because if you remove a species, you're going to affect basically its entire niche. An ecosystem can collapse with the removal of one species, specifically if it's a keystone species. I want to remind you of that term endemic too. So there are endemic endangered species as well. Endemic being that term that means that these species live in a particular area. There's not that many of them. So species like that tend to go extinct very relatively easily, as opposed to, let's say, a generalist species that's widespread throughout the planet. So being both endemic,
Please excuse the interruption.
one second. So, being endemic, being a K selected species, not being able to reproduce until late in age, these things all increase the likelihood of a species becoming extinct. And also overhunting, overharvesting certain things. And so I can tell you a little story. Pirates, all right, used to take the Galapagos tortoises, or tortoises, large tortoises like that, and they used to keep them on their boats because they wanted live, fresh meat. And so these tortoises, lived a very long, long time on the boat. And they didn't, they didn't need to move around a little, so they used to pile them in boxes, unfortunately, and they were overhunted, so their numbers basically plummeted. And um, if you go to the Galapagos Islands now, there's a it's called Charles Darwin Station, where they actually breed Galapagos tortoises, and it's a successful story because they have now reintroduced a bunch of tortoises back to um, somewhat normal numbers that previously existed. But overhunting definitely is a cause for extinctions as well. Okay. Now, what are some strategies that we can use to stop the overhunting or protect endangered species? What a beautiful tiger. And that's my actually spirit animal, the rhino, right there. It actually might be transitioning to a snake because I'm into the snake vibe right now. Um, anyhow, So one thing that we could do is criminalize poaching. So if you do kill an animal, if you do kill like a rhino or a tiger, or in New Jersey, we're not even allowed to go kill a bear if it's in our backyard. We're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go kill a deer in your backyard either. You would need to get a hunting license to do that, and in that case, there's only particular areas you can hunt. So it is very controlled here in the United States. But let's go to other different countries. In other countries, it might not be that controlled, and you might have more wilderness, so you might have more animals, so it will be harder to control things like poaching. So poaching still exists, unfortunately, and this is something that further deteriorates a species. You start getting genetic similarities. You have inbreeding going on, and it leads to the demise of the species. So we could criminalize poaching, we could protect animal habitats, and sometimes we have like a national park where these animals are protected. I know Yellowstone National Park where the bison are protected, but the bison were over reproducing. So I saw this advertisement that they were going to, I guess, have a hunters lottery, and they were going to be allowed to kill 50 bison. So they were going to go in there and have a controlled culling, if you will, where we cut back some of the bison. But anyhow, a national park, having a protected area like a preserve would save these creatures. And also legislation, just try to say we save these species. We're going to check your baggage, make sure you're not taking any pieces when you're leaving a particular country. We're going to make sure it's not being sold on Amazon. We're going to make sure that you can't sell these products legally. And so those are some practices that we can do to do it. And so let's see if we could convert this into a free response question. So the problem is, there's a lot of, or you know, there are species becoming endangered. What are some reasons that species become endangered? Well, species become endangered because of habitat destruction, invasive species, pollution. I'm going through HIPCO. If you remember, it's on the next slide. What else is there? There's another P. Climate change, overhunting, pollution, and I'm going to cheat. Poaching, the one that we were just talking about. All these reasons. So we can give all these reasons. Now, how can you solve the issue? Well, you can solve the issue by criminalizing poaching, protect these animals, making a preserve, a protected area, and legislation. You got to be specific though. And I know there was this last white rhino, and they hired a team. Not hired a team. There was a team of anti-poachers that would follow this rhino around to make sure that no one killed it. And so these are things that you could potentially do to try to save organisms. Okay. And so, you know what? I'm going to make this plug right here. I don't feel bad in certain captive breeding programs in zoos. And if we didn't have these captive breeding programs, these species may become extinct. And that's why something like the panda bear, when there is a baby born in a zoo, it's such a big deal because there's so little numbers of these species that exist in the wild now that, you know, when the zoo has it, it's like a successful story of a captive breeding program. There's a plug for our field trip. Hopefully, you come. You can see some of the animals um, down at the place that we're going to go. All right, let's continue. All right. So, like I was saying before, so why would species become endangered? You're going to remember HIPCO, and that's an acronym for explaining the reasons why species become extinct. That would be HIPCO, habitat destruction. And a lot of habitat destruction is because we're going to basically cut down, a forest or a wildlife area and start growing crops. And so we grow crops or farming for humans, and we're taking space away from wildlife. Another thing would be invasive species, introducing a potential competitor. And it's a very funny picture and a not funny thing. And so, look, this is an invasive species moving in, and these are all the native fish, and they're so scared. Isn't it hilarious? Look how mean that fish looks at. They don't have teeth. He has teeth. Oh, he's going to kill all of them. This could be an example of like the snakehead species. Poaching, like we discussed before. Pollution, we've discussed that as well. Climate change. So, species don't necessarily evolve or adapt as fast as the climate can particularly change. And so this could be causing potential declines in potential species. I remember, I think we were talking about the golden toad, which is an endemic species in Costa Rica. And this endemic species needed a particular humidity or rain, and due to climate change, that shifted and changed. And they only existed on like this one mountain. And so then that one mountain wasn't getting any rain anymore. These toads became extinct. I think they found another one. I'm not sure. I have to do a follow up study on that. And like we discussed before, overharvesting. Right? I'm a fisherman. I totally understand this. And every year there's different regulations on the size of fish that we need to have. Particularly in 2021, this has been a really bad striper season for me, and I'm very upset about that. I've been out 4 times and I have caught one. Last year I was out 3 times and I caught like 12. So I'm pretty sad about that. Hopefully it'll pick back up. I don't know. It's early. We'll see. Um, okay, and over harvesting is basically that. Okay, you take more than can reproduce. So, what could we do to solve that? Well, we could, let's say, we could make sure that there's limiting sizes of the fish that we take. So, they have to be a minimum size of, let's say, a bigger size. So, they would have reproduced before we can take them out. Or, someone really smart told me this one. They have to be a minimum size to take, but if they're a maximum size, over that size, you don't take them either. So, for instance, let's say the fish can grow up to 5 feet. Let's say you can't keep them unless they're 2 feet. And if they're 2 feet, you can keep them until they're about 3.5 feet. If they're 3.5 feet, then you're basically you gotta let them loose. That means that the older fish that can reproduce a lot, probably carry a lot more eggs, is left to reproduce. At the hole, too, a large fish has been around a long time. So it's going to bioaccumulate a lot of those toxins. Probably not going to be the healthiest fish to eat anyhow. So it's best to let that fish go. Okay. It's not greatest to eat the biggest fish. Sometimes you want a fish right size to eat when we're talking about toxins and bioaccumulation. All right, let's continue. We're getting close. Oh my God, so close. All right. So another thing to dive off of habitat destruction is that we need resources. And so sometimes when we take these resources, what this is called is habitat fragmentation. And we've now fragmented a place where a particular organism would live. Now, there are certain species that are deep wood species, and there are species that are edge species. What is the difference? Deep wood species are going to need deep woods to survive. This would be a tiger. It needs a lot of woods, okay? You won't see a tiger in a situation like this. You may see a tiger in a huge area like this. It has a lot to hide. It doesn't want to hear cars. It doesn't want to hear noise. It just wants to hear animals so it can eat it. That's a deep wood species. An edge species would be something that you typically see all the time. And us, we here in Jersey, we live in the suburbs. What do we see? We see deer. Deer would be a particular good edge species. Raccoon, good edge species. Possums, good edge species. Black bear, probably deep wood species. If one does wander into our neighborhood, it probably has rabies. It's probably sick. It's probably lost. Okay, we did have that situation a couple of years ago. So once again, we have deep species and we have edge species. A lot of the endangered specialist species, case-selected species are deep species. So when we fragment a habitat, this drastically reduces their numbers and makes them harder to survive. Okay. Remember the term island biogeography? That doesn't just refer to just islands. This right now could be associated as an island. Being a small island, this does not support as much biodiversity as this larger area. Okay, the larger area, aka the mainland in this case, is going to support more. This will be more prone, the organisms here will be more prone to extinction because of the smaller habitat. All right. So, what can we do to, let's say, solve the problem of habitat destruction or habitat fragmentation? What we can do is develop something called habitat corridors. Beautiful things. And easily said, it's basically going to be a pathway between two adjacent islands. So we have one island here, one island here. We're probably going to have some greenery here. Beautiful. So Of course, the organisms are probably not going to dwell in this region, but now, since there is a corridor, aka a highway, it's not probably not going to drastically affect the ecosystem. And this area here, beautiful, they left some of the forest void, but look how much surrounding forest is. So if I was a tiger, I could potentially just go around. Okay. And this area will fill back up. It will fill back up because of the surrounding seeds, the soils left in place. And so we're minimizing the damage that we're causing to our environment. Here's another image. Beautiful. Look at this. We took all these trees, but we left multiple corridors. So if I was a frog, if I was a turtle, if I was a tarantula, if I was a tiger, if I was a bear, oh my, there's always ways that I can get to both mainlands in this case. This is a beautiful example. This is actually like a green, a green passageway over a highway. And I know what you're thinking. The animals are not going to be smart enough to do that. I'm going to say nope. I'm going to say the animals will be smart enough because pheromones are really, really strong. Okay. And imagine you putting a pheromone scent trail right here, and it was a particular snake, or if it was a particular tortoise, or a particular ant, a particular deer, then if you did that, then they'd be attracted to that smell and kind of follow that scent, and they do have shown to work. Okay, so these are habitat corridors. All right, and what else can we do? Like I said before, a lot, and this is going on in Brazil. A lot of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest is happening because they're trying to farm. Okay, so a lot of slash and burn is occurring because the infrastructure is not there. Um, but with slash and burn, it's not necessarily sustainable, and because it's not sustainable, um, so the slash and burn is not sustainable. So in because since the tropical rainforest doesn't have deep soils, those soils are quickly eroded away. So instead of staying where they are, they just burn down more forest. Making agricultural practices more sustainable would actually be a good thing. So this couple, there's a case study that we're going to be working on tomorrow. They bought some land and all the trees were removed, and they restored it. So one thing that you can do is restore an area back to its original formation once you're done with it. So look at this before and after. We'll watch that story later. Once again, you were amazing. Thank you for all of your hard work. It's all going to pay off, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.